Okay, so this has been drying for a couple of hours now, and what we've done, we've just given this a light sanding just down the spine here to take any off. Now I'm not using a real heavy duty grit because we don't want to tear into it, and there is some very, very fine riveting detail. So I think we're going to lose a bit of that on the top, but unfortunately that's just one of those areas where we're going to have to put up with a little bit of damage, if you like, and perhaps have to pop back in and re-rivet a little bit. Now the joint itself is very, very good. I've got no complaints about it at all, but because it's on a spine, especially this one over here for the fuel tank, over the cowling there, we want it to be a perfect fit. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure it is by using a little bit of Mr. Surfacer. Now you may have seen I make my own. I've got a thicker version of it here, and this is just your standard sort of, like I've got here, Squadron Green putty mixed with cellulose thinners, or you could use airbrush lacquer cleaner. We'll melt it down and you can use it thicker. So what we'll do, we'll give this a good old shake, and then we just flip the lid off, which is always a bit tricky. Getting in the top, there we go, just like that. Then what we're going to use a nice thin brush, because we don't want this going absolutely everywhere. So we just get it on the brush here, and we're just going to paint down a line down the middle. Make sure you haven't got any bubbles in there and things like that, and then we're just going to put this down here, just down, and then obviously just over the back. Now this will dry quite quickly, so it should dry within about sort of half an hour. Might be worth leaving it about an hour, and then what we can do, we can come back, gently sand this off, and then see how it's looking. If it's looking good, we can stop there. If it's looking a little bit like there's a little bit of a gap still, we can go back and do a bit more. So we're just going to carry that down there, and we're just going to do the front of the tail as well. What you want to do is just avoid the actual panel lines themselves. You might be able to see there, I've just stopped it on the panel lines. So we'll do the same to the bottom as well. Okay, so the Mr. Surfacer has been on here now, and we're totally dried, and just looking at it you can roughly get an idea of how it's going to be, you know, obviously with your finished article. So what we do, we've got here the four-way sanding stick. So what we do, we start with a rough one on the top, and we're not digging in and scraping in, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to tear out the filler and go too far down. So what you want to do is just take off the top coat and the majority of it all off. We just work our way down, because all this doing by using the strongest side first is just really getting rid of all the nasty bits. So you're down to there like that. Then you can move along over to a finer one. This is the pink one in this case, and give that a go over. Now obviously you could just start with the pink one and work your way through, but that one's all overdone like that. Obviously we'll take care of the tail and other areas I'll do in a moment, and then we'll just work our way over onto the white side. And what you're doing, you're looking for, like we've got here, a little bit of white showing through as well. You can see that on the close-up, but with the white one sometimes you know, it's identifying that there's a problem. If it's just nice and smooth and clear, then we know we're okay. But we're just going to pop along here and keep working our way down and handy, and then obviously really just have a feel and see how it's looking. Then obviously what we'll actually do, we're going to come along and we'll put a little bit of acrylic on there just to test the seam, make sure it's all okay a little bit later on, and if it does need a little bit more, then we can take care of that. So we're going to do the front one as well, and obviously the underside, I'll get on with those in a minute. After that, what we're going to be doing now is making the actual surfaces and things like that. Now the tails go together, two halves, straightforward together, just like so. And then obviously you build up the parts, which I'll show you in a minute, and they're a straightforward push fit in. And then hopefully once we're in like that, they'll be movable, of which they are, so you can have the tails positionable, which is quite a nice touch. So we'll leave those out for a moment, because to be honest, they're still a little bit wet. So if we show you what we're doing here, what you actually get, we've got the rudder. You're going to get a bar. Now the bar's going to run down in here, and then obviously you've got two little joiners here. We just get the end one, which is the other end of the rudder, and this top one in here. So if I just check my references to make sure we get this absolutely spot on. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to build this up. So if we start with the underside, what we can actually do, you don't want to use any glue in here at all because obviously it's all movable. You could put a tiny bit of super glue just in the middle just to hold the pin in place, and it stops it running up and down. But again, it's sort of personal choice. So what we're going to do, we're just going to slip the top one on like that, and that's the hook shaped one. The more square one is going to come to the bottom. So then hopefully we can just get that in as well. Slip that in, and there we go. We should be able to position these in. Quite straightforward. It's going to sit, and just make sure they're in their little grooves they need to go in, just like so. And then the easy way is just come along with some glue, generous amount, okay, and we're just going to walk it down the rear. Now if you're using extra thin like this, you're not going to have long to move around on this because obviously it dries very quickly, but if you use a couple of bubbles of it or jobs like that, then what you can do, if you're all happy how it's all lined up, you can literally just sandwich, push down. A click is always a good sign, and then we just hold the two together. These are all swinging quite freely, and then what we can actually do is just going to put a touch just along this front edge, just like so, up around the back, and then to make sure we've got a nice seam around the rudder, holding it upside down. If I do it on the side here like this, you can actually just run around, and what the capillary action will pull it up into the join. We can just go up and round like that. Very happy with those. Watch obviously your fingers, because obviously you don't want to glue them in. And we just got a clamp, little peg, just to hold that together, and that will be a straightforward push fit into the tail, which then gives us our rudder. So that's those. Same with the horizontal stabilizers as we got here as well. Very, very straightforward to do all of those. Now the next big thing we're going to come across is actually working with the actual wing section itself. Now this one here, we've been along and we've taken out and we've cleaned up all these seams. I just nick them off with a knife, same as we did with the fuselage, and then sand them in flat and take out all the bits and pieces. Now you have got to open up some holes, so you want to make sure which ones you're actually opening up. Obviously you're doing the A version, so we're going to open up the one just down in here. So we're literally just going to pop a knife in there and scoop it out following the actual main part itself, and then what we can do is we can tidy that all up with a file a little bit later. Then obviously we've got this square just down at the bottom, so we just take this one out as well. So we're just running the knife around, not pushing too hard because you don't want to bend out the plastic or anything else like that. Should be fine, and then what we do, we just flip over and you should be able to see it, and then just very, very lightly just run your knife blade down, and it should run and follow the softer part where you've scored it. And then if all's going well, you should be able to push that out just like that, and then you can get in here with a small file just to tidy that up a little bit more, or you could just use your blade of your knife just to square off any corners and take care of anything like that. So that's that one out. Quite straightforward, nice and easy job to do with that one. Now as you go around, obviously make sure, check your references to the different versions for opening up various holes on this. If you're going to have the bombs, obviously you're going to have to open up the holes and so forth. I wouldn't worry about painting it just yet, we'll take care of all that afterwards. So that's that one done and dusted. Same goes for cleaning up. You might as well do it now. It's cleaning up obviously the tops of the wings. Same thing, just mind how you do these front ones and making them a very nice flat finish. Obviously when it does join up, we don't end up with moon shapes cut into it, but there again, it's a nice one. Should be okay with that with no problems. Tail wheel, not going to worry about that for the moment. We'll come back to do that a little bit later on because it's a straightforward push fit straight in, so I'm quite happy to leave that. So the next thing what you actually move on to now is doing the actual main gear wheel wells themselves. Now for that, obviously we have to make up the round parts of it. Quite straightforward, but what we need to do is nick out these parts. So have check your references. It's parts G12, G11, 21 and 22. And what we actually do, you have to take out the tracks that run in there. So we just do this with a knife. You don't have to be absolutely perfect with these, but just make sure you've got it to the right size, because it is quite important, otherwise they won't sit with the top of the wheel well as it comes down onto it. So we just make sure we've got the right ones, and that's it. So if you just watch your instructions, they'll show you how to do those, exactly where they are. But basically parts G22 and 21, you take off a little corner off of one of the parts. All becomes apparent when you try and line it up with the main gear tops. So there we go, that's those done. If we just lift these out of the way and just clean them that way, a bit more clean down here. So there we go. And then if we start by doing G8 or which is G7, whichever way you're going to do it, just putting a drop of glue on top and bottom like that. All we do is just line them up, and that lines up with the hole at the top for that one. So it's very straightforward. Once you've got that one, I would leave it a few moments, but because we're a little bit pushed for time on this build, we're going to push through and get them done. So we've got that one in like that, and then what we can do is we'll just put the others in to make the outer part. Just take your time with it. As I say, I'm rushing this a little bit. This one's going to go just in here. What I would recommend is go around afterwards and just tidy up all your joins and make sure you're all level and everything else like that. And then this one, we should be able to just push this one straight in. He goes in the back. That one goes in there. And we just glue from the outside. There we go, that's the actual wheel well part itself. So we just leave that to one side. Grab the top part, which in this case is part 21 on the AA fret. Now the thing is, I have to say I haven't really come across this on any of the other parts, but there is two tiny little ejector pin marks down in here, which I'd like to get rid of. So by using one of my thin sticks, with a very fine grit. It's not a massive one, it's just that I think by the time it's got a wash in it, it's going to show up. So what we'll do is we'll just get it down in there and sand them out. As I say, they're very, very shallow. Some of you probably won't even bother doing it, and I wouldn't blame you because they are that small. They are tiny, tiny little ones. But because we know we're here and you're watching, I'll take care of it. So there we go, we just sand them out with a very fine sanding stick. Can't even pick them up. So there we go. Now the reason we cut out those tracks, those little nicks that we took out of it, is because obviously it's going to fit onto these. So that's the problem with that. So what we're going to do is just make sure we've got this round the right way. There's a little locating tab just down here on one of the sides, and that goes onto the outer part just down in there. So what we're going to do is just make sure we're all lined up, and it should be a very nice fit, as is the rest of the kit. And all we're going to do is just pop around, just going to drop some glue in from the outside just to seal up any holes that we might have anywhere. Just down in there like that. Bit of a push. If you find you've got it and it's not quite sitting nicely, a little bit of extra thin goes a long, long way at making it a nicer fit. So there we go, that's that done. And there's the other one. So that's both the wheel wells done. Quite nice detail down in there, some nice riveting detail as well. Just those ejector pin marks, but it goes together very, very nicely. The other part we've got here, and whilst we're on the bits for doing these, is our first little bolt going to be going in. But what we've actually got is This is the undercarriage wheel wells, which are for the other side of it. This is where it braces and actually bolt together, and it's going to be a very nice fixed join with these. Now, a little trick for getting nuts and bolts in, as I use, if you use a cocktail stick, slide the nut up the end, okay, and then you can go along and place it in. Now, obviously you have trouble getting it off, so you just put the plastic part over the top. That drops down, and then obviously you can just squash that down into place. So that's held in place now. Touch of extra thin along the top, and that will go down, seal down, and weld all that up. Now, the first one you've got to do, and this is the part where the actual undercarriage will swing on the actual arm. You've got a little indentation on the inside, just down in there. So this one is going to sit in. So what I'm going to do is just run a little bit of extra thin and let the capillary action do its work. And this is going to sit in just like that. And what we're going to do is come back and give it another more generous amount. And because this is going to be a while before it has any weight on it, we're just going to let that take care of itself. So that's both of those actual done now. So what you can do is come along with your actual main wing part itself, look at it, and then just basically go along and start lining it all up. So if we get this all round the right way, this one is going to fit just down in here. And then if we get the right wheels in the right areas, this one then sits on the top and gives it. So then from the underside, as you can see, we've got the wheel well in place. So those can all be glued into place now. The other part we got here is number A5, which is if like the main spar running across. There again, mind how it all sits in and everything else like that, but he's basically just going to come along and sits down right over the top of everything, and it will give the strength from the wheels on the undercarriage and stop the wing from actually bowing. But there we go, quite a straightforward one to get in there and get that one done. So I'll get all these parts together. Okay, so there we go, that's those in, and that spar is in there properly and welded down to hold the wing. So obviously, you know, it's quite floppy at the moment, but by the time we get the other bits and pieces on, it should hold it all together. Right, you've got to make your decision now, obviously, which version you're doing for the different types of gun tops you have. And it's the only real bit that's off with the kit. We don't get any guns to play with actually inside, and ammo belts and things like that, which would have been quite nice to have, but we haven't. So these doors can all just be covered up, which is very straightforward. What I tend to do is obviously put them in underneath, come along, and then in from the top, and let the capillary action do all the work. Just don't put your finger from the other side over the actual joint itself. If you do that, what's likely to happen is the glue will literally stick to your fingers and away you go. And we don't want that to happen, because otherwise you'll leave a thumbprint in all that nice detail. So it's very straightforward. Just follow the call outs as these go all over. There's little tabs, so you make sure you get around the right way as well, which is quite handy. If we just do this one under here, so that's the top of the wings taken care of. Just give it a little dab at the top there. So that one's done, and I've got the other one done already. Same for the underside, a little bit more tricky. Obviously there again, just watch your areas where you're putting them in, and you can do these from the top as well. If there's a little gap, just touch the actual gap itself and let the capillary action do all the work and work it all the way around. If you have got a little bit too much glue, just a quick whip over with your finger like that should take care of that. So we just put these others in. So if we just get a little drop of glue down there, tiny bit in there, and there we go. Now this one here, depending on how it's twisting and sitting and all the rest of it, can be a little bit fiddly to fit, because what happens is you get the front end in and the back end sticks up. So just make sure you're okay and tack it down properly. So we'll just get a bit of glue in there first, just like so, and then this one can come along and we just drop him in. But as I say, it does tend to want to ride up for some reason. I found it happen on the other one, and this one's done it as well. But there we go, that's those bits all in and done and taken care of. Then what you can actually do, once that's totally dry, as we're on this side, you can come along and put the top of the wings on. Now remember, it doesn't butt right the way up, it comes over to the side. So make sure you get the little locating tab here lined up with the one on the underside, and that will give you your right areas where it should be. And all being well, when it all goes together, it should make for a very, very nice joint. So if you have got a little gap, don't worry, we'll come along with a little bit of Mr. Surfacer as we've done with all the others, just to take care and fill any of those in. So what we'll do, we're just going to touch and let the capillary action do all the work on this. So we're just going to dab the actual joint itself and work our way along these three, and then we've got some pegs on the go here. So what we'll do, we just peg these nicely in position. Then once these are all dry and we're happy with how they're sitting, we can make our way along to the other side. So what we're going to do, we're just going to touch more glue and let it tap in. Just like so. So that's those with another one peg just there. So we're happy with those on the front end like that. And then what we do is we're going to just make sure and seal up these back ones as well. So we're just going to pinch it together just back here, holding together. And just along the inside up flap, you can have a generous amount in there. Just like so. Running out of clamps, so we can just put a little spring-loaded clamp on there to hold that in place. Now we've done the wingtips as well. There again, depending on which version you have a different choice. You can have the clipped, which is the shorter version, or the full elliptical wing, which this one is. Now there was a little bit of a seam running down, so we've done the usual, holding the brush on the underside and then whip it round like that. Gives us a nicer join. These have been drying, so we're coming along and we're just going to sand them down a little bit, just take the edge off of them to make sure we're all okay. And the unfortunate thing is we filled up a little bit of rivet detail, but hopefully that will all clear out. Then what can happen is these will then just slide in and lock in, and we can take care of any little seams on there. So I'm going to get the other half of the wings on, we can get the wing tips on, and then we can get on with the actual I haven't actually put these tail planes in, but they're on, but we've put the actual ailerons on there now, which are quite handy. So that's okay. Sorry, the elevators, they're on there now. The actual main wing itself, as you might be able to see here on the close-up as well, we've done the guns, we've put the Browning ones in on the end as well. Just take your time with those and line them up carefully. I did find taking out the little tab, there's a little tab on these, actually on the small part itself, cut that off and it makes for a nicer fit. This one played me up a little bit on this side. But anyway, we're all in there now. I've put in the radiators, they're in there now for the cooling, and then you've got your left and your right. If you're wondering where these are on your AA sprue, they're actually a loose one floating around. These are a lovely fit. When you get them on the right side, they're a lovely fit and go in there with no problems at all. We're very, very happy with those. But because obviously we're going to paint the radiator, I'm not going to glue them in until the radiator's painted. Then I'm going to glue these in and then do the work as well. So that's quite straightforward. At the same time, you might be able to see these parts down here. I've got some little bits of photo etch, which are a nice little touch, which go on the edges for the flaps. So they're on there now. Now these flap systems, if you're having it in the raised position, if we get it around the right way, this is this one. If you're having it in the raised position, then what you're going to need to do is actually cut it off and cut it in two, and it just cuts off just like this on the close-up, comes away, and then you've got your photo etch to put on there. All I did, a tiny little bit of super glue along each one, and then literally come along, drop the photo etch on and just push it down with a cocktail stick and make my way along just like that. So that's nice and easy to do. Ailerons, as we were saying before, they're done as well, exactly the same as the rudder and the tail planes are, and then these are a nice little fit because all that happens is they come along and they'll just push into the grooves. So just take your time lining these up, but what happens is if you follow the little groove that's in there, there should be a little guide that guides it in. You get this one in first, and then there we go. But just take your time with it and lining them up and getting them in, because when they're lined up fantastic, they just slide in. If we can get this one in, we'd be laughing, but it doesn't look like it's going to want to go just at this precise second, which is always the way when you do it on camera. There we go, it's going in there now. So there we go, once they're in, once you're in like that, they're quite a nice fit, and obviously you can position them as you want them to go on there, so that's very nice. So really that's the wing section done. These holes are up here, you might be able to see on the close-up up here. What that is when the flaps are in the drop position, they push up, open up a little flap on the side and come through. It's a little detail that we'll put in afterwards. So what's going to happen next, this section is going to come along. We're going to need to paint this up down in here, get this all painted up because obviously it's the bottom of the cockpit section, but really it's a lovely little fit. It's just going to come along and click in just like this and gives us our nice fit, and it really is a nice fit. I've got, you know, we're not going to need filler or anything else in there. For those of you who know the Spitfire, you'll know that this is how it's built in real life when they're put together. This front end is how it'll go, because in a moment it calls out for doing the undercarriage underneath. We won't obviously bother with that at the moment, we'll do that later on. You might be able to see on the leading edges that we've actually got some filler going on here. Same thing as we did with all the other seams, bit of Mr. Surfacer. Gonna let that go off for a few hours and then we can sand it in. So what we'll do, we'll get the bottom of the actual cockpit painted up on this wing section. We'll get it glued into place. We've got a couple of little formers go on the front here, and then we can move on with the engine sections. We've got the actual main parts painted green on the inside, as you can see in here. That's just the show through the floor. You're not going to really see it, but you know, it's done at the end of the day. Underneath here, what we've done the radiators and we painted them silver. Just a little bit of XF19 in there, to be honest. Just hand painted him. It doesn't have to be too well because you're not really going to see it anyway. So the air scoops as well, I've painted the inside of these XF19 as well. So if we get this right with the left and right, they then can come on and will sit in there quite nicely. What we can do, we can pop a little bit of sponge up inside there just to mask off those radiators so we don't get any blow through. So we might as well stick those in place. Originally I wasn't going to, but you know, looking at the way it's all going to lay and how it's going to go, it's probably worth getting them in now. And then we won't have any trouble with glue marks afterwards. So we just pop these in here. So we just get them in. One on that side, one on the other. You can do it both ways like this. You can either put the glue in first or in afterwards, whichever way you feel more comfortable doing. The only trouble with putting it in first is sometimes you get the little bubbles pop up as you put it in. There we go, that's those in just like that. Very happy, and that's the main wing section now done. So you know, that's it. We've got a few little bits to go on there, but certainly that's those done. At the same time as I was waiting for things to dry, I've put the actual undercarriage together, which is step 38. Very simple. You've got a bar that runs through the middle, which is obviously going to help with some of the weight, and then glue halves together. The only thing you do have to watch out for is that you do have to nip off the little holders that hold the actual undercarriage for the suspension bracket, because obviously it's a different one on the A version and B version versus the C. The C has them, the A doesn't, so you need to just sand those off, which is down in this part here. And then once it goes in, these are going to be a very nice tight fit. They just push into here and lock into place. Then we're going to screw an actual screw which holds this gear into position, which is a lovely little touch, because you know, that way we're not running around with glue and got glue moving, and it's very, very strong. And with that bit of metal in there, it does keep it together. So there we go, that's those bits really done now. As I say, very happy with how that's gone. So really finishing this section off, what we're going to do is bring the fuselage halves together. And that is as literally as simple as pushing it down and on. The only thing you want to do is just check your height of your wing pieces going on. Make sure it all settles down in there. Obviously you've got to get the under part in first, so it all goes in there nicely, and then it should just sit and push in. As I say, all you got to do then is just worry about lining it up this line here. But once you push it in, it's quite a bit of a tight fit. You can get in there quite nicely, and we don't have any trouble. So that side is in there absolutely perfect. The other side, a little bit of movement. So what we're going to do, we're going to glue this in. Literally, we're going to just let the capillary action do the work. We're just going to touch it a couple of spots and let the capillary action, then we're just going to put one little brush mark along and let that weld in. And then obviously we've got those in there, we've got the same on the other side, so we can do that one as well. And obviously these tops of the wings are the important ones, so those we want to be very nice joints. So just take your time lining it all up, making sure they're all sitting in there, that you're happy of how they all are. But it should be quite a nice little sort of click fit as they go in, so just take your time, making sure you're settled in and you're happy of how they all are. Once you are happy, I would leave it just to settle, let it go off totally before we come back. So that's those bits now done, and what we can actually start doing now is getting on with the engine.